I'd like to welcome everybody to the meeting. We've got a couple of really interesting presentations coming up, and this is our September meeting. Just share that. You should be able to see. It's our members meeting, September 9th, 2023. For those of you who are interested in contacting the RASC, we have a couple of different ways to do that. You can contact our president, John Nangries, who's over in Prince Edward Island, at president@halifax.rasc.ca. You can also go to our website, halifax.rasc.ca, where you can contact most of the people on the board. So if you need to get a hold of the treasurer or you need to get a hold of the Nova Notes editor, their email addresses are all found there. And if you miss a meeting, I was going to say, if you miss this meeting, something's really wrong, because you should be here listening to me. So if you've missed one of our past meetings, you can go to our YouTube channel, and we have a collection of all of our presentations on there. So if for some reason you do miss one because you're away, you can sort of get caught up on things that are actually happening. So in a packed program today, we have the welcome. We don't really have any special announcements. They would come under the under notes from the board. There's only a few items. David Hoskin is going to be the usual moderator for a montage of photos that have been taken by center members over the past little while. And usually we have quite a few more of those, because it's been a gap because of the summer break. Not that the weather has been the best, that we'll see what happens. Our main presentation is Jason Dain, and I'm really looking forward to this, both because we were supposed to have this presentation at Nova East, and as you probably know, the campground where we have at the Smileys Provincial Park was impacted by the flooding out here in West Hants, and is closed for the rest of the year while they fix things up. That, and the bridge just outside the park entrance was severely compromised in the fact that a quarter of it went away, and there was also some severe problems with the bridge that you cross over going into the park itself. So hopefully next year Nova East will come back. We've already had it canceled by hurricanes. Now we can add flooding to the list. I'm not sure if we want to try for something new next year, like wildfires or something completely different.
Pat?
Yeah.
I don't know if other people have the same challenge I do with my iPad, but I'm still seeing the intro page and not the agenda. Are other people seeing the agenda?
No.
So as I was saying, I've been looking forward to this presentation by Jason, and also because of the fact that he has two interests in which I have a passion as well, not only astronomy, but birding. So his talk is going to be about burning the candles at both ends, his trip to Lapland, which was this year. And the nice thing about it is he got to see some absolutely amazing northern lights and got some amazing bird pictures to go along with it. So that's going to be an interesting talk. Then we're going to have a 15-minute break where people can stretch their legs, walk around, try to do another circle on your iPhone fitness app or whatever the case may be. And then we're going to come back. Paul Heath has a poem for us, title of which is The Balance. David Hoskins is going to then tell us what's up in the September skies for those who want to actually plan some observing for the rest of the month. And I will wrap things up with notes from the board. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I assume then that will let David bring up the photo montage.
Okay. Let me share my screen. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yep.
Yep. Right. Yep. So, as was mentioned, this would normally be fairly long, since it encompasses images taken over 3 months, and it was pretty selective in what I chose, but there weren't huge numbers because, as everyone knows, the weather this past summer's not been the greatest. But nevertheless, people got out and took some nice photos. So let's start off with this image of the Milky Way, taken by Jerry Black over Kitchimacoochik Lake. I think this was on one of the summer canoe trips. Water was incredibly still. You can see the stars and the Milky Way reflected in it. So very pretty. And Jerry got the comet 12P Pons Brooks, which was an interesting one. It took on an odd characteristic as it warmed up, the head of the comet, and it's been referred to as the Romulan warbird / Enterprise. It looks a bit like a spaceship of some sort. But this is one of the better ones I've seen of this particular comet. It's a tough one to get. And Jerry did a bit of deep sky. This is Messier 5, a globular cluster. Nice definition in the center, and you can see how far out the stars extend from the cluster. And this was a lucky shot. This was at Dark Sky Weekend in Kejimkujik National Park. And we were on the observing field, and we saw a Starlink satellite train go by. And it was paralleled by the Tiangong space station. And Jerry happened to be taking a time lapse, and he was able to extract this frame out of it. It was
It's actually
cool
an iPhone
to see
picture.
in person. What's that, Jerry?
That's actually an iPhone picture.
Oh, it's iPhone. Okay, even better. Anyway, very nice. Kind of a 1 in a million chance shot to see those objects going overhead at the same time. And Jerry, this image of the Swan Nebula, Messier 17, quite nice. And you're going to see there are this was a subject of for several people over the summer, so you'll see a few different images of this particular emission nebula. Michael Bochat took this image of sunspots on August 28th using his refractor with a 2-inch Barlow. Good definition, showing the umbras and penumbras, and I think he's got a light bridge here on this particular sunspot. And Michael took this image of the crescent moon on August 9th. And the gang of 4 craters are quite visible, as is the Mare Crisium. And a Perseid meteor. Late one, August 14th, captured by Michael. Nice bright one. Barry Burgess took this composite image of the Perseid meteor shower. Dave Chapman bit of afocal imaging using his refractor, and you got this very nice image of the nearly, I guess it's just past first quarter moon, waxing gibbous moon on the 26th of July. And sketch of sunspots on June 22nd. This particular point in time, there were, I think there were 9 or 10 sunspot groups visible. The sun was very, very active at that point. And this is an image again by Dave Chapman, taken in the early morning, showing you can see that fall/winter is coming. Orion appears well above the horizon now at dawn, and so he has a nice view of Orion with the ISS passing by. And another composite, this is one Jason put together of the Perseids. He captured a lot more than I saw, I think. And Jason Dain also had to go at the Swan Nebula. This is his image of that particular deep sky object. This is a really nice one. This is another one of Jason's, and it is the LDN 792 Dark Nebula. And these dark nebulae are really hard to capture. You need a lot of contrast to bring them out. And this is another one from Jason, another challenging target, Sharpless 291, which includes a very faint supernova remnant, which he caught quite nicely, showing the shell of gases from the exploded star. Tim Doucette took this image of the sun in hydrogen alpha at the end of July, and he's captured some nice prominences, and the spicules are very, very noticeable here. So a great resolution on this image. This is a fun one. Lisa Ann Fanning took this photo of the sun on June 7th. And just to give you some idea of the amount of wildfire smoke that was in the air around in New Jersey. The sun is completely dimmed. I took this image of a couple sunspots in white light and hydrogen alpha on July 13th. The days have been better than the nights this past summer for imaging. So there were a lot of us doing some solar imaging. And this is a prominence imaged on July 16th. And you can see some spicules, but nowhere near the nice definition that Tim got. And Crescent Venus, I think I captured this in around 11 in the morning on August 7th, as Venus was coming to its closest approach to the Earth. So it was the largest and its thinnest. Few of us were doing some planetary imaging. This is is Jupiter and the Galilean moons on a night of quite good seeing. And Saturn, taken the same night, and as I said, the scene was really good. You can even see the Cassini division in the image. And I haven't done too much deep sky this summer, but I did get this one of the Iris Nebula. And I also had to go with the Swan Nebula. This was from Dark Sky Weekend, and I took this with my little Dwarf 2 mini robotic telescope. I continue to be amazed at what a 1-inch aperture will show you with modern technology. Fabian Pittman was doing a little bit of solar system imaging. He captured this image of Jupiter and Saturn. And again, Fabian was able to show the Cassini division with his captures. I think he might have been imaging the same night I was. The scene was unusually good for the coast of Nova Scotia. Blair McDonald was busy at his cottage. This is the Flying Dragon Nebula. And Blair also imaged another emission nebula, Sharpless 286, and in the center is an open cluster, NGC 6823. Blair also had to go with the Swan Nebula 17, and the Pinwheel Galaxy. So Blair was quite busy and had a few good nights at his cottage this summer. Tom McIntyre is also been active with his Dwarf 2, and this is his image of the Lagoon Nebula with the Dwarf, and this is one of the best ones I've seen, actually, the Lagoon taken with the Dwarf 2. He took this image of the Orion Nebula, again with the Dwarf 2, and Andromeda Galaxy with the Dwarf 2. And last but not least, Tarek El-Wazi traveled out to Bayswater Beach and captured this image of the Milky Way over the ocean. A very, very nice image. How the horizon blends into the water. Colors just very smoothly transition. And that's it for the montage for this month. Hopefully September, we have a few more good nights than we did in the summer, but doesn't look like it so far.
Have to unmute first. Thank you, David. I've always been impressed since I never got into astrophotography. I let other people curse and swear instead. And back when they started cursing and swearing back in the 80s, it was using 35mm film and doing like 45-minute hand-guided exposures to get a smudge to show up. And the improvements in the techniques and the technology since then, especially the images of the sun, they're absolutely amazing. I remember when solar images were basically black and white, and now there's just so much detail visible. It's absolutely incredible. So I'm glad we have lots of good astrophotographers, and I'm glad there's lots of people out there taking photographs. Speaking of taking photographs, that leads us into our main presentation for the day. Jason Dain's name should be familiar to many of you. He's won the astrophotography contest that the center's put on a number of times. In fact, he's actually had 2 astrophotos of the day for those who use the astrophoto of the day app. And I remember seeing one thinking, oh my God, that's an amazing image. I wonder who took that, and clicked on the little arrow to see the details. I was like, son of a gun, it's Jason. So he's taken lots of amazing photographs. And as I mentioned, we both do birding and astronomy. And there's some similarity between the 2 hobbies. In both cases, you're always looking at something that's just a bit too far away, a bit too dim. And if you just had a bigger instrument or a better camera, you'd actually be able to make something of it. So they both have that, both fields have that area where you're always looking for better equipment and better cameras. Birding has a few advantages, though, over astronomy. For one thing, stuff just shows up at random. Now, in astronomy, you've got comets that tend to show up at random. But if you want to see Andromeda, you've got to wait till the right time of the year. And if you go at that time of the year, you will see Andromeda. In birding, you can go to the same place 10 days in a row and see the usual birds that are there at that time of the year. And then the 11th day you go, and something that should be 3,000 kilometers away from here should actually show up, will actually show up. My personal horror story of that happening was, some of you may recall that there was a big deal over the stellar sea eagle, which showed up in Nova Scotia earlier this year, last year of the pandemic. It all starts to blur together. But this is the bird that's bigger than a bald eagle. And it was literally, as the eagle flies 700 meters from my house for 2 days. And I didn't find out about it until the evening of the 2nd day. And the morning of the 3rd day, it was gone. So you never know what you're going to find when you go birding. It's not like you're going to go in astronomy and just go suddenly discover, like, oh my God, there's another Jupiter-sized planet that orbiting the sun that wasn't there the day before. The other thing about bird watching compared to astronomy is we get a lot more eclipses than astronomers do, because we get so many times when you see a bird and the bird is between you and the sun. And one of my favorite birds this time of the year, because it's not making much noise, is the backlit warbler. You can tell by the shape it's a warbler, but you haven't a clue what it is, because they tend to always be right between you and the sun, and can be a real pain at sometimes. But I know that Jason's had lots better luck when it comes to photographing the sky than I've ever had, as well as for photographing other things that I've ever had. And it knows that he's done birding on 5 of the 7 continents. And I was getting all excited when I finally looked at my life list of birds and realized that for every species I've seen, there's 17 I haven't seen. So I still got a lot of catching up to do. So I'd like to turn the meeting over to Jason, and welcome to our center meeting.
Thank you. Thanks, Patrick, for that introduction. So yeah, it'd be kind of like Patrick said, some planet just kind of randomly shows up in the sky that shouldn't be there, or some celestial object that wasn't there yesterday is there today. So it's definitely unpredictable. But on the other hand, one of the comforting things about astrophotography is you know exactly where your target is and when it's going to be there and where it's going to be. And there's no what we call in the birding world dipping, where you travel from one place to another to see something and strike out. So if that happens in astrophotography, we got bigger problems. so that's one of those things. So I will share my screen if I'm not already. Okay, and I will kind of take you through my presentation here. So I call I name the presentation "Burning the Candle at Both Ends: My Journey to Lapland." And as is quite common here in Nova Scotia, even I find myself constantly challenged with wanting to do astrophotography at night and wanting to go birding early in the morning, because that's often the best time to do it. So more than once I've stayed up all night capturing astro images, slept in my truck for a couple hours, and then gone birding immediately after. So that's tricky to do, but I've done it. About me, so I'm a wildlife and astrophotographer based out of Stillwater Lake. I live right around the corner from Dave Lane, actually. So I drive by his observatory on Abbey Ridge every day, multiple times a day often. But funny enough, I never knew him even while I was starting astrophotography. I knew of him, but I don't actually think I've ever met him in person. Actually, no, that's not true. He helped me collimate my SCT when I first got it over at my place. So I work as a product manager in a natural resources management software company. So I've been a propeller head for a lot of time, working in the bowels of computer systems and data management and that sort of thing. So that's obviously been a big help for me in astrophotography because it's very technical. I sort of seriously got into photography in about 2015 when I got my first DSLR. My key motivation is to explore and experience nature. So a lot of my bucket list, or I'd say almost all of my bucket list items, are natural phenomena or natural sites. My kids want to go to Paris or Rome or whatever, and I want to go to the Pyrenees and look for a bearded vulture. So we often have conflicts about vacation planning, and ultimately I win because I'm the banker. So when they're funding the vacation, they can choose. So for my I started out with a Nikon D7200 and a pretty basic 70-300 zoom lens. My brother had Nikon, so I figured that would be an easy way to get access to more lenses than I had when I started. So currently shooting a Nikon Z9 with a 500mm f4 lens, which sort of combined is probably worth more than some cars on the road, but it's quite enjoyable to use. It's fast, takes very sharp images. For nightscape imaging, I have an Astro Modified D850, which is a full frame 5-megapixel camera, and then a couple of Rokinon / Samyang fast manual lenses for wide angle and for some of the nightscape stuff that I've done. And then I also have a Skyguider Pro Star Tracker for the sort of the portable stuff. For the sort of the serious deep sky stuff, that's a whole other topic. So I won't get into that here. So if you want to visit my website, I've set one up this summer and post some blog posts there and have a bit of an album of the kinds of work that I do. It's jasondainphotography.com. So feel free to check that out. So how did my trip come to Lapland, or how did I end up in Lapland? Well, my office, or one of my offices that I work out of, is in Helsinki, Finland. So I'm there 3-4 times a year, and I've been trying to find a way to align a work trip with the Northern Lights for a few years now. And I was going to pull the trigger just before COVID hit and had to kind of put it on the shelf. So I was really hoping to get there in September or March to sort of align with the solstice and, when the Earth is in the best position to catch solar storms. And originally I had booked something in 2024. I just said, I'm going to go, I'm not going to wait anymore. And then, you know, a meeting at my work came up in March 2023. A wildlife tour that I have been looking at had a spot opened up, so I just kind of went for it. You know, I ended up in Scandinavia for 3 weeks. So 2 weeks of that was running around Lapland with my camera, and the other week was in the office in Helsinki. So quite an abrupt change. So I'm just gonna see if I can get this out of the way. Okay, so I sort of started out in Halifax, flew to Helsinki, sort of rented a car in a place called Ivalo, which is right here. And then I drove up to northern Norway on the Arctic Sea, and then came down and then traveled west to Tromsø, and then through the mountains in northern Sweden as well. So I covered a lot of ground while I was up there and saw some pretty cool stuff. So, you know, that's got a good sense for what the north was like. So we'll jump into it. So I kind of arrived in Helsinki at about 4 o'clock after an overnight flight from Toronto, and planned to do a little bit of birding in Helsinki with a friend of mine that I hadn't seen for a while. So we spent the day running around Helsinki, found this really cool tawny owl in a tree in a park, which is quite similar to our barred owl, but the European version. You know, this is the sort of silver birch kind of river bottom kind of land that's pretty common in Finland. And sort of the whole day we kind of visited parks. This is what's called a white-throated dipper. So this is actually the only aquatic songbird that exists. There's 2 of them, one in North America called the American dipper, and then this is the white-throated dipper. So they basically jump in the water and run around on the bottom, getting dragonfly larvae and other kind of aquatic creatures, and will jump out onto the bank of the water, shake off, and start singing. So they're quite a bizarre bird. They're quite funny. They kind of, they're called dippers because they'll just kind of sit there and bend their knees and go up and down like they had too much coffee. They're quite entertaining to watch. So here you can see it's just come out of the water with some sort of critter in its mouth, and it's eating it. And it was, you know, minus 15 or something out, and it didn't care. It was just going about its business. So here, it's a couple of pictures of a northern hawk owl. So northern hawk owls are Arctic species that breed way in the far north, but in the winter they'll move south into places like northern Canada, or like even around Nova Scotia. We'll see them some winters. So as we were driving around on day 1, I was watching the aurora alerts, and my phone had pinged and said that there would be a chance for northern lights that night. And as I started looking at some of the data, some articles and some sites that I saw, I quickly realized that we were in for a good show. And being at 60 degrees already latitude in Helsinki, I thought, what better chance to get some northern lights practice before I actually headed way up north. So they had me, or the aurora forecast was for KP6, which if you look at this chart, I mean, KP6 would be, you know, across the Baltic Sea in Estonia and southern, you know, Denmark. They should be able to see it. So in Helsinki, it would be quite good. So I, you know, after birding through most of the day, I basically had my friend drop me off at a rental car place. I called one of my coworkers who lived in Tampere, which is about 2 hours north of Helsinki, and I sort of found a spot. As it so happens, he's also into astronomy, and in Finland, they actually have this website where people go in and actually register dark site locations on a map with the coordinates and what you can expect when you get there, if there's bathroom facilities, if there's power, you know, what the light pollution is like, more than just a sky magnitude, but if there's bright light or whatever. It's this whole website. It's a really great idea. So I was able to go on there and find a place that worked for me. And I, got lots of coffee and snacks, and away I went. And it so happened that my rental car was a hybrid, which was kind of nice, and also had studded tires, which in Helsinki didn't seem like a really necessity, but as we go, we'll talk about that a little bit more. Just before I go on, how much time do I have, just so I can keep track, because I'll probably talk for a lot longer than you want me to if I don't put a control on it.
I would say somewhere's in the 45 to 60-minute range.
Okay, yeah, that's good. I'll just start a stopwatch so I have an idea. Okay, so Finnish roads in winter. Finland, unlike Nova Scotia, gets cold and stays cold. Once you get away from the water and the influence of the Gulf Stream, you don't see the pavement between October and April. So studded tires are a necessity in that part of the country, because just regular snow tires won't cut it. So I made my way up to a place just east of Tampere, and probably 3/4 of the trip was on 100 series highway, I'd call it, which was 2 lanes each direction, bare and dry, and then sort of the last half an hour was on back roads that were snow covered, and had snowbanks that were probably in the range of 6 feet high, and were sort of pushed back by a grader. So you had this very smooth frozen white surface with these really high snowbanks. So it was quite enjoyable to drive at excessive speeds down those roads, like a rally car driver, with studded tires. The grip was fantastic. And, if I got into a snowbank, it was pretty soft and fluffy. So I had quite an enjoyable time being a rally fan, driving down the back roads of Finland by myself at night. So I ended up at this marina, which was, obviously in the middle of winter, there was no boats there, but it had this nice wharf with a nice view of the northern sky. And so this is sort of what the scene looked like when I first showed up. And, having not really seen the Northern Lights that well in Nova Scotia, I was super excited to see this image come up on the back of my camera. And, this is sort of what I expected to see in Nova Scotia, and, was pretty happy. So you can see Andromeda's here, the Milky Way is here. It's a pretty interesting scene. So things proceeded to continue to kind of ramp up. So I'm going to play a short video. So hopefully this works. Can everybody see this video?
Not yet.
Stop. Actually, wait. I'm going to share my whole screen so you can actually see the video. Share screen. Share screen. I was only sharing the one app, so let me start this again. So can you see it now?
Yeah.
Okay, so I shot a bunch of time lapses while I was there. So I just created this little video kind of showing how I went up to the edge of this little lake in a place called Puntari, Finland, on this wharf. And then basically I was shooting about a 5-second exposure every 8 seconds, continuously with 2 different cameras, and then watching the sky, because the Northern Lights just get stronger and stronger as I sat there. And, being able to see them with the naked eye was actually quite dramatic. They were, it was far and away beyond what I could have expected. The Northern Lights were, above me. They were looking to the south. They were in every direction, and they were sort of naked eye visible easily. And even with my cell phone, I was able to capture pretty awesome photos. So this is just some of the photos that I got. This is sort of looking northeast. There was reds, there was blues, nice curtains of Northern Lights. And one of the things that I'd read online is that you want to kind of keep your images short so you can kind of get this definition of these pillars of light. So I tried to keep my exposures under 30 or under 5 seconds, or about 5 seconds, just so that I didn't kind of blur all this light. So I have a pretty fast lens at f2. It's f1.4, but I shoot it at f2 just because the stars get funky otherwise. So that's with a slower lens and a lower ISO, you have to push your exposures of 10, 12, 15 seconds, and things start to get blurry. So this night was actually an unintended, I hadn't planned on going, but I thought it'd be a great chance to practice before I got up into the real serious stuff up north. But as it turned out, it was like an over the top amazing night. So the aurora were like directly over my head. They were they call these coronal aurora. So you're basically like looking at the bottoms of the curtains, straight up. So I don't know how many times I said wow that night, and my face hurt from smiling because I just, I was standing out in the middle of this frozen lake doing woohoos and jumping up and down, and it was quite a sight. I'm glad there was nobody else there to see me, because this was like a dream come true for me. So so again, the sky was pretty colorful. There was good definition. I didn't get to see Steve, but that's still on my list. There's some more photos here. So there were some pretty good reds coming in, and it even actually overexposed. There was so much light in the sky. That 5 seconds I was overexposing, which didn't notice at the time, but it's not that big of a deal. And then some clouds started to creep in, which made things interesting. But oops, let me go in this direction. Yeah, and then on my way out, I noticed this log pile, a little bit of a harvesting area on the side of the road. So some northern lights and a little bit of a meteorite in the distance here. And this is now my desktop on my computer, because this kind of I work in the natural resources sector, doing forestry software. I like the northern lights, so this is a good image to kind of have as a desktop. And then this is another image on the road out of a little barn. All the barns in Scandinavia are red for some reason. And I think, here at some point they probably were as well, but white trim, red, rusty color paint, pretty common. So, and then this is a panorama of about 150 degrees or so. You really have to work fast to get this to work. So basically snap a 5-second photo, turn the camera 90 degrees, take another photo real quick so that you get some continuity in the aurora. So this is, two 24 millimeter focal length shots on a full frame sensor stitched together to try and give an impression of what the horizon looked like looking north. So, so yeah, so from there, I went back to Finland, got to my hotel about 6 in the morning, got a late checkout, slept until about 2 in the afternoon, and then went to the airport to fly up north. So up there, I was meeting a tour group to go photograph some wildlife on the coast of the Arctic Sea. And so this was the little town that we ended up in called Ivalo, which is in northern Finland, about 400 kilometers south of the Arctic Sea. So we started off in a van and drove up there. I'm just going to show a little video of some of the photos. Actually, this is as we were up on what they call the fell, which is kind of like tundra in English, but they have this sort of high tundra they call fell, and it's like short willow bushes and lichens and moss, and it's 200 to 300 meters above sea level, but there's no trees. So they have these orange spikes everywhere to kind of give you an idea where the road is, because it can get pretty, if the snow is blowing and it can get pretty white, it's hard to distinguish where the road is. So this is just gives you a kind of an example of what the scenery is like there. We stopped at a little lodge to check out some birds before we hit the tree line. So this is a red squirrel, sort of the European version. They've got long tufts on their ears, similar to ours, but they have these really long tufts. Pine grosbeak, which is another what they call circumpolar species. So in the birding world, geography often separates species. So you may have a very similar species in Europe and Canada, but there are different species, same genus, different species. But in the Arctic, a lot of species are what they call circumpolar. So the pine grosbeak in Finland is the same species that we have in North America. So it's quite interesting how some species are the same and other species are different, even though they're separated by continents around the Arctic. So that's something that that I find quite fascinating, that some have split and some haven't. So this little guy is called an Arctic redpoll or a hoary redpoll. So these are they're a species now, but they'll likely become a subspecies in the near future. And they're generally just a little bit more frosty than the common redpoll. They have a much smaller beak and their undertail is completely white. So this was a really, we see them in Nova Scotia and they're on a spectrum. So, it's really, it's a great source of arguments for birders. Just like, is it a hoary? Is it not a hoary? And there's really no right answer because they're all going to get lumped together into one species anyway. Second here. Okay, so this is a bullfinch, which is a European bird. And then there's this guy, which is called a Siberian jay, which is in the same family as our blue jays or our Canada jays. And they look and sound quite similar to the Canada jays that we have here, but they're a more grayish, reddish brown than sort of gray and white. And they're quite gregarious. They'll land on your head. They'll take bits of your sandwich. They're quite fun birds to be around. They're not shy at all. And this is one of those species that has split geographically, but is almost identical to the other a similar species that's also circumpolar. So it's just really, I'm not strong in genetics, but I just find that really fascinating how that works. Here's another one. This one's called a Siberian tit. And everybody always chuckles, or I shouldn't say everybody, I always chuckle when I have to say that because in Europe they call small birds tits. So there's great tit, blue tit, coal tit, and basically that's from the French petit. So basically any of these small birds, they couldn't come up with a name, so they just said they're tits. And this one looks like what our boreal chickadee looks like, but is a little bit duller, and basically sounds like a chickadee that's had too many cigarettes, like a really raspy call. So that's another one of those quite interesting ones. Okay, so here, just to give you an idea how much snow, this is an 8-foot shed. So the snow is almost up to the eaves, and then there's 3 feet of snow on the roof. So I thought that was quite funny. And then as you get further north, there's, each of these towns has these big stone churches. So in Norwegian or in Finnish, they're kirke. So Kerke is how they pronounce it. So so this is just driving along the road. These are reindeer, or what we call caribou. So above a certain line in Finland, Sweden, and Norway, it's called the reindeer husbandry area. So basically above that line, farmers can raise reindeer in the open without any fencing, without any controls. They're just loose. And the Sami people, which are the I'm not sure what the proper term is these days, but they're the First Nations folks that are in the northern part of the country, and they raise reindeer as part of their heritage. So they're everywhere. So here's, starting into the rock formations, getting into northern Norway, coming into the northern part here. The pink sky was quite pretty. And then finally pulling into Batsfjord, which looked a lot like a normal fishing village in Nova Scotia would look like, with all the boats tied up, and it's a similar scene. One thing I will say about if you're going to travel to this part of the world, I would say September or March are probably your best bets, because you have some daylight, in terms of you've got 8 hours or 10 hours of daylight, and you've got, the same of night. So it's really the ideal time to go. If you go in December or January, it's dark all the time. If you go in June, it's light all the time. So, it's a good trade-off to go in the spring or the fall. So, so up in Batsfjord, we were there to shoot a whole bunch of different sea ducks that spent the winter in the harbor because it was an ice-free harbor. So we were set up in a little floating blind. They had thrown out some food for the ducks, so they came right in, and a bunch of us photographers were sitting there photographing them. So I'll just go through this. So this is a king eider, which is a species that breeds on the Arctic tundra. This is a male, quite striking ducks. And then, you go from early morning sun to blizzard in about 5 minutes. So the wind blows off the ocean and creates these snow squalls. So, the conditions were quite challenging. It was probably -20 at least, sitting in the hide. So pretty challenging conditions to be photographing stuff. So this is a king eider with a starfish that it had caught. So they're eating sea urchins and crustaceans and starfish off the bottom. So that was quite entertaining to watch. And then here's one just lifting off. They're pre-breeding, so they're actually chasing each other around, trying to attract mates. So there was all kinds of talking, and the birds were making noises and chasing each other around, and it was quite entertaining to watch. This is a black guillemot. It's a species that we have here in Nova Scotia. They were already, because the Gulf Stream has the water temperature so warm, even in the Arctic, these guys look like in full breeding plumage in February, whereas our birds are still sort of ashy gray until about May when they get ready to start breeding. So it's quite interesting to see, the birds in full breeding plumage 3 months before they'd be in that plumage here in Nova Scotia, 30 degrees latitude difference. So this guy's a long-tailed duck. This is a male showing off for a female. Usually they kind of get up on their hindquarters and flap their wings and puff out their chest. So this is kind of the I'm cool, look at me pose. And then they would do this kind of, they put their chest down in the water and paddle their feet and make bubbles and noise with their long tail up in the air. And this is, again, to attract a mate. And then whenever there was a chunk of ice floating by, all the ducks would come and eat it because it's a source of fresh water. So it's interesting how they knew that it wasn't salty, and would just gobble it down. So this is one of those king eiders eating the snow, frozen or whatever. This is a common eider, which again, we see these off Nova Scotia most of the year. There are different subspecies, but same species. Another shot of a king eider. And then this is a Steller's eider, which again, it breeds in Siberia on the tundra and is only sort of accessible on sort of frost-free bays in the winter. So this is a new species of bird that I'd never seen before. So it was quite striking as well. Probably only about half the size of a king eider. So this is like the Fabio pose, coming up out of the water and shaking off. Again, a Steller's eider, king eider. I'm not sure. There's just lots of pictures. So here, I had my shutter speed set super high, and oftentimes when birds will preen, after they're done preening, they'll stand up out of the water and shake their feathers. So as a wildlife photographer, you get to know when birds are preening and organizing their feathers. The last thing they do is get up and shake. So it always makes for an interesting shot. And again, you got some reflections off some of the fishing sheds, the reds in the water, which is interesting. So this is, the sky is white, the snow is white, it's snowing. So it's pretty hard to get any kind of contrast, but these reindeer were actually walking up a snowy mountain beside the road, and the sky was white behind them. Thought it made it for an interesting high key shot. You can see this one here is wearing a green GPS tag so that its owner knows where it is. So that's kind of how the farmers keep track of them. So they'll paw through the snow and look for different types of lichen and plants and kind of eat that for the winter. So that's in Batsford. So again here, this is what the ocean looks like. And then this is the drive out. Wasn't quite as nice as it was on the drive in. You know, we were pretty well snowbound. So then we drove south and then east to a place called Vardo, which is, you know, probably only about 30 kilometers north of Russia, across the fjord. So again, not very nice, -20, -30 with the winds, ice. The roads were just a sheet of ice. But here's got a little bit of a sun. Dave, help me out. Is this a sun dog if it's going all the way around, or is it only if it's on the 45 or on the 90s? Maybe he's muted. I always get that wrong, but anyway. So just some interesting skies as we were driving in, and then this reindeer with some antlers posed nicely for us on the side of the road. You can see the snow gets these crusty little drifts because it's always windy there. So you get some real neat definition in the snow. So the next stop on the trip was a place called Hornoya Island, which is a really large puffin colony and seabird colony in the Arctic Sea. And it's one of the only places in the world where you can actually see puffins on the snow. And the reason being is because it's in the Gulf Stream. So there's a warm current of water moderating the climate. So you're at 72 degrees latitude, but you've got birds that are essentially getting ready to breed at the start of March because the food is available then. So that's when they breed. Whereas here, you know, the herring and the mackerel and the food that those birds eat when they breed around here doesn't show up until June. So our puffins and our guillemots and that aren't breeding until later in the year. So it's all food related, which is quite neat. So this was me at the wharf getting ready to take the boat out to the island. So you can see it's pretty wintry conditions, you know, 3 layers, you know, long johns, you know, fleece, and then snow pants and jacket, hat, you know, heaters in the boots, heaters in the mitts. You know, you're stuck out there all day, so you didn't want to be cold. So this is kind of the scene that we pulled up to. So there's this giant rock, and the sky was completely covered with birds. But I think there's over 1 million birds that nest on this island, and it was just crazy how many there were in the sky. So I'll just go through a couple of video clips here. So this gives you an idea of so those were all black-legged kittiwakes, which are a species of gull that breeds up there, breeds year round as well, and offshore islands and stuff. And then there's also this next video here of the mirrors. You can see them flying around. So I'm just going to pause it here so you can see all the birds in the sky. These are what they call guillemots or murres. They're alcids, kind of related to penguins and puffins. So there's all kinds of them in the sky. If you look over here, there's these 2 radar domes, and where we were, like I said, was, you know, very, very close to a town called Murmansk in Russia, which is a huge naval base. So this was part of the NATO monitoring radar that basically is, there's a whole network of radar domes all along the coast to keep track of what the Russians are doing. So that's kind of interesting. Let's do one more. So just to give you an idea of how many birds there were. So you know, our guide, the first thing he said, okay, when you get to the island, if you're looking up, keep your mouth closed. Best advice I've ever been given. Because there's so many birds flying over, you're bound to catch something. So here, I'll just do one more quick video. So again, just a constant stream of birds flying around. All right, let's do one more clip here. So if you look out on the water, you can see all these are all birds, kind of shoulder to shoulder, sitting out at sea, and then there's all these birds up in the sky. So pretty impressive. One more, I think, here. Yeah, so this is with my cell phone at one point. And then I slowed it down in slow motion. You could feel the wind from the bird's wings. It was that, it was that intense and that close that they were flying over. So, and then one more little slideshow here. So this is a European shag, which is like a cormorant, same idea. And then here's a picture of all the different birds in the water. It's snowing at this point, so they're all diving for food, and they would dive in big groups. So you would see just sort of a consistent gray on the water, and then these big circles of birds would just kind of disappear as they would all go down and feed on the big schools of fish that were in the area. This is a bit gruesome, where a black-backed gull knocked one of the mirrors out of the air and proceeded to eat it right in front of us. This is a purple sandpiper about to get taken over by a wave. So these purple sandpipers breed up in the Arctic, but they're pretty tough. They spend the winters on the shore, and we even have them around Halifax in the winter, around Peggy's Cove and Point Pleasant Park and those kind of rocky shorelines. So they're picking the sort of the green vegetation off the rocks. So and here they're also eating these mussels that are a good source of food for them. And then here's a shot of some of the murres flying by at a low shutter speed, just for something to do. And Eurasian shag, shags and cormorants don't actually have the oils on their feathers like ducks and other seabirds do. So when they dive into the water after fish, they have to fly up on land and dry off their wings so they can fly, because they don't have those oils to protect them. So you often see them perched up like this, even around here, after they've fed and hunted in the water. They'll actually have to get up and dry off their wings before they can fly away. And then here's just kind of one that kind of describes what it was like on the island. You know, it's snowing sideways, it's -20. And this guy's just standing there gutting it out. So I felt his pain. And then this is a razorbill, which again is a similar species, or is the same species that we have here if you've ever been to Bird Islands or Pearl Island. Puffin, Atlantic puffin. So they're, you know, end of February and they're already in full breeding plumage. Here's another shot of a puffin on the snow. Again, these guys are getting ready to mate, so they're, you know, they're grooming each other, they're displaying, they're fighting. You know, it's a busy time. So here, these two male puffins were getting into it for this female in front of them. They were grabbed each other by the beaks and were flipping each other over, and it was getting quite violent at times. And then here's a shot of just the collection of murres all just kind of face into the wind, trying to survive, basically. So you notice some of these have this little streak around their eye. So probably around 20% of these birds have this. They're the same species, but it's just a genetic variation. It's called the bridle. So different colonies have a different ratio of bridled versus unbridled. So there's really no explanation other than just genetic variation. So so here's a puffin again flapping his wings, and puffins are only, you know, the size of a football, maybe a little smaller. So they look big on pictures, but they're really not that big. And it's just kind of interesting to see a bird that here is, usually on rocks or on the grass, just in the snow. So that was the attraction. A shot of a puffin. And then, of course, the wind was blowing at our backs. So when the puffins were taking off, they were taking off into our face, which was really cool for getting some of these wing spread shots with the snow. So that was this is a shot that I really like. And then again, these razorbills are having a little tussle in the snow. Probably over mating rights. And then the winner obviously has to tell everybody that he's the king of the hill. And then this is a shot of the kind of conditions, there's ice forming on his beak. It's basically almost whiteout conditions. And these birds are just taking shelter, just sitting on the snow. This guy here is trying to get to a better location, but there's feet of snow on the ground and they're not really suited for walking on regular ground, let alone on snow, because their legs are so far back on their body. So they were really struggling at times. This is a murr, just taking it easy. And then a bit of a wider shot of the rock cliff with this one guy had a neat spot. So kind of caught my eye with the other birds in the background. He's kind of king of the hill here. And then you can see up on the rocks here, these are kittiwakes. So these gulls are nesting on these little ledges. And that's where they make their nests and they have their babies and everything. So another shot of a mirror. This is what we call a thick-billed mirror, which is another species versus the common mirror. So these guys breed in the far north. Here's a shot of a kittiwake again, a couple of shags, another kittiwake in the snow. This guy had been sitting here a while, so he was starting to get some snow accumulating on his back. So he has kind of a perturbed look on his face. So what's this? We just went through that. Okay, sorry. Okay, so we basically ended the wildlife tour after that. So then I had kind of 5 days that I had plotted out to chase the northern lights. So the first town that I went to was a place in Sweden called Abisko, which had a national park and some mountains, and looked from the weather to be a reasonably good spot for clear skies. So I drove 4 or 5 hours to get there, had a nap, got some supper, and then went out looking for the northern lights. And as it turned out, there had been a coronal mass ejection a couple of days prior, and the aurora forecasts were off the charts for how good it was going to be. So I had sort of been messaging with this guy on Instagram about the northern lights and thinking that, I needed to wait for, astronomical dark or dark to actually see them. And he's like, no, go now. And it was like, nautical twilight. So I was like, okay, whatever. So I packed up my stuff and it was, 7 o'clock or something like that. And the interesting thing about being that far north that I found was that, when it got dark, it took about, or when the sun went down, it took about 3 hours to get dark. So like nautical twilight, astronomical twilight, and, civil twilight were like almost an hour each. So it took a long time for it to get dark. So I figured, there's no sense rushing out, but the aurora values were all kind of going haywire. So as I drove up there, I got settled and I think this is the moon and Venus. This was in February, so I think it's Venus. Setting over the mountain here. And then I went and set up on this lake, and this was before it even got dark. So this was like an hour and a half before it got dark, probably. And the aurora were bright enough that I was only shooting about 1 second exposures. So this is just a little video compilation that I put together of some photos. And as it turned out, this is looking east. So, it was so strong, and I was so far north that, the northern lights were basically everywhere, to the south, to the north, in every direction. The whole dome of the sky was color. So this is some of what I was looking at. And actually, I just pause and go back here. Oh no, I went too far back, just a sec. So so here you can actually see this is the Pleiades. So things were in, being so far north, things were in really weird spots in the sky. So this is like looking southwest, where I was. This is a time lapse of, this is when it was just going crazy. So I think it was about KP8 at this point, which is, I've never seen anything like that before. So it was super strong, super colorful, naked eye, dancing. The blues and the purples and the reds and the greens. And actually, if I go back here, so unbeknownst to me, and it was actually advertised in the hotel, but the university there in Abisko was doing a test where they actually sent a rocket up into the magnetosphere and ejected some stuff to basically register some sort of magnetic readings. So there was these little wisps over here are remnants from that, and then there was these balls of color in the sky from this rocket. So it was quite interesting. I didn't expect that, so that was a nice surprise. So this is again is when it was going crazy, KP8, very bright. So this is actually looking due south. It's just super, super bright. This is looking west. This is Lake Tornatrask is actually the name of the spot that I was standing. But a nice view of the sky without any kind of light pollution. So this would have been, Bortle 2 or something like that. So yeah, did that. So yeah, like I said, I actually look back, and that night in Abisko, that KP8 and the geomagnetic storm was the most intense in about 10 years. So from the previous solar maximum. So I really lucked out that night. That was that was crazy, how good it was. So that was a night to remember for sure. So then that's a bit of a funny story. So the next morning after that, I went to drive around to look for a few birds before I headed on to my next destination. And I saw a couple of moose on the side of the road, and I thought, that's really cool. I should back up the car and get some photos. The car didn't have a rear view camera like I'm used to. So I ended up putting one wheel into the snowbank. And, I'm used to driving a 4-wheel drive truck that I can just basically drive myself out of whatever. And, I had this front wheel drive sedan that I was stuck on a flat road in a snowbank. So I ended up having to wait a few hours to get somebody to come pull me out. And I think I paid about 400 euros or something for the tow truck. So it was crazy expensive, which is the norm in that part of the world. Everything's expensive. So anyway, on the way back to the hotel, I snapped a photo with this owl, and it's like, I missed the moose completely. They ran away. And anyway, so then I drove from Abisko to Tromsø, which was about a 4 or 5 hour drive again, through the mountains of Norway, along the fjords. And then when I got to Tromsø, I dumped off my luggage, had some dinner, and then brought my camera down to the waterfront. And sure enough, the aurora were going even before it got dark. So I managed to capture some of the aurora over the big church in Tromsø. So this is the hotel that I was staying at on the waterfront. And this is just the boardwalk kind of thing. So the Northern Lights were pretty good, not spectacular, but it was interesting. So here's the bridge coming on to Tromsø, into Tromsø city. And then this is the big church that everybody talks about. So made for a nice shot. And then this is looking directly across the water from my hotel. So it was getting cloudy at that point. So I kind of packed up. Here's a short, oops, I did that. I'll just keep rolling here. I'm almost done. So the next, so I had planned to stay in Tromsø for 2 nights, but as I was kind of preparing for my trip, I was, I'd spend evenings kind of watching the weather in the Nordics and, watching the cloud radar. And I discovered that, while Tromsø may be a beautiful city and it's pretty along the coast, the chances of actually getting a clear night on the coast is about 10%. So if you stay in Tromsø, 9 times out of 10, you're going to get stuck on a bus and drive 3 hours into the interior to get clear skies. So, while the foregrounds are beautiful, your chances of actually seeing the Northern Lights on the coast are really low. So, I guess from if you're planning a trip and you want to go to Tromsø to see the Northern Lights, don't. Would be my advice. Go to Northern Finland. It's cheaper. It's just as nice in terms of the skies are nice and dark, and it's clear pretty much every night, as opposed to Tromsø, where it's kind of cloudy because it's on the west coast, and the predominant winds blow from west over the ocean. So you get the clouds rising up the mountains, and you get rain and snow and just generally crappy weather. So I ended up bailing on my second night in Tromsø and driving back to Finland so I could get one more night before I had to go back to Helsinki. So I went to this place called Palace National Park, which was basically a ski resort. So I stayed at this ski resort up on these mountains. And this is another panorama shot. This is what they call a willow ptarmigan. So it's kind of like a grouse. And they turn all white in the winter, except for this little red eyelid thing. So they're quite fun to see. So here's a shot of the Northern Lights. They weren't this was pretty normal KP2, KP3, conditions. It wasn't anything special, but it's still pretty bright. So this was the panorama type shot of the sky. You were getting some blues and purples. This is a whooper swan, which is the national bird of Finland. So they had already arrived, and there was only little bits of open water in the streams, but they were there and establishing their breeding areas. Oops. So I created a bit of a time lapse showing the Northern Lights. They weren't super bright or super defined that night, but I just kind of walked out this snowmobile trail at the ski resort and set up my camera and had a thermos of coffee, and I just parked myself up beside a snowbank and sat out in the snow for 3 or 4 hours watching the Northern Lights. There was, it was quite funny. There was a hotel full of people, 500 meters away, and nobody else was outside watching the Northern Lights. So obviously I was a tourist and was the only one out there enjoying the show. So, okay. So that is kind of a whirlwind trip through Lapland. It's how much time do we have? It's 2:23. So depending on time, we can take some questions or discussion if anybody wants to ask anything.
Jason, it's Judy speaking. Is there any spot that you went to on this trip that you would want to go back to and spend more time at?
Abisko, without a doubt. So Abisko National Park is it's sort of a alpine park on the edge of this huge lake, and There was hiking trails, there was downhill skiing, there was cross-country skiing, snowshoeing. It was a really neat place. And it was definitely somewhere I'd like to go back to.
Bring the family
So-
this time, as a family trip?
Oh no, their family wouldn't be interested in that. But if I, for the thing to remember is that, for me to fly from Halifax to Helsinki on my own dime is about $3,000, right? I'm going for work. So my work is covering all my travel expenses to get to Sweden or to get to Finland and back, hotel and meals while I'm there working. So the incremental cost for me to go from Helsinki to Ivalo, it was like 100 euros to fly north and then like 80 euros a day to rent a car. So, if you don't have to pay for the flight overseas, it's really cheap, comparably. So I have the luxury of going over to going to places like this for work. And, so the incremental cost to take a few days off and go, go explore is really low. So whenever I can, I take the opportunity and explore places that my family wouldn't want to go, or, things like that. So, and oftentimes my wife will come with me. She'll take a week off work and come with me and just explore on her own. So, yeah, very fortunate to have the position that I do. So.
There's a question in the chat from James of what ISO do you use when you were shooting those 5-second Aurora pictures?
Usually either 1600 or 3200. The cameras that I shoot are Nikon, which are what's called ISO invariant. So what that means is that it doesn't matter what ISO you shoot at, the post-processing the image to get to the same level of brightness will give you the same result. So for example, if I shot an image at ISO 100 that was completely black and raised at 5 stops in post-processing to get to what ISO 3200 would look like, I would effectively end up with the same image. Wow. And I've done this and I've tested this on my own. I've watched videos about it. I've tested it on my own. So, so ISO is kind of irrelevant with Nikon cameras. As long as you don't blow out the highlights or you don't clip the shadows, it doesn't matter. So I set my histogram to kind of be off the left and not too far to the right and just shoot away. So I don't, and again, the benefits of shooting at a lower ISO is you get better colors, you get less noise. If you raise the exposure by a stop, you're going to get a little bit more noise showing, but the same amount as you would if you would have done it in the camera at the time. Whereas like a Canon or a Sony, even if you shoot it at ISO 1600 and you raise it a stop versus you shoot it at 3200 in the field, you're going to get more noise by raising it in post than you would by shooting it at that ISO to begin with. So that's one of the really nice things about Nikon cameras. And again, I've done, I was like, there's no possible way. When I first saw this, I was like, come on. And so it's effectively just, it's adding gain to your exposures, and it effectively doesn't matter.
Oh, I had no idea that was even a thing. So that's always good to know about. Anybody else have any other?
Jerry, I think on the mirrorless cameras, I think they're ISO invariant from about either 400 or 1600. I think if it's the Blair told me the site once before. I think it's like photons to something, or I can send you a link for it. But it basically shows you the ISO noise curves, and there's a big drop at 400 and a big drop at 1600. So with your Z6 or your Z7, you'd either shoot at ISO 400 or ISO 1600 and don't bother with anything else.
Yeah, there is a big drop at 400 for sure in those curves.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Jason? Okay,
That's
I guess.
pretty impressive.
Yes, I guess you can stop your screen sharing.
Yeah.
I've been to Iceland where there's a cliff like the place with those millions and millions of birds. The big difference is you're at the top of the 400-meter cliff, so they're not flying
Yeah,
over you. The
that's right.
disadvantage of being there is that you have is the danger from the puffins, not so much running into you, but they build burrows underneath the grass at the top of the cliffs.
Mhm.
And if you get too close to the edge and you step in one and your foot goes through it, you lose your balance. So they actually have a white line spray painted about 1.5 meters in from the edge of the cliff.
Mhm.
They also have a sign that says, "Do not walk around while looking through your viewfinder," because it is
Yeah,
a
I can
long
see
way
that.
down.
So I
Yeah.
have one more question for Jason. You obviously went with a list of birds you wanted to capture. Did you capture them all, or what percentage of what you wanted to see did you see?
Well, I was on a tour, so there was only so much free time to explore. So I saw obviously the birds that I wanted to see that were part of the tour. The only bird that I didn't really get to see that I wanted to see was a gyrfalcon, which is the largest falcon species on Earth. And they breed in the Arctic, and they spend a lot of time in the Arctic. And I didn't get to see one of those, but I've actually seen one in Nova Scotia, in Joggins, about 5 years ago. I saw an immature gyrfalcon, and they make a peregrine falcon look like a chickadee. They're just big, thick, scary looking falcons, and they're when they fly, everything else flies away. So they're a very impressive bird.
Yeah, along the line of what you just mentioned, the chickadees. This is a coffee cup that my son got for me for Christmas a few years ago. About the fact that what we call chickadees, they call tits over in the UK, and it's kind of funny because the change in nomenclature, because like we have the common loon, which is a rather bland name for a pretty impressive bird. If you ever get to one close, in the UK they're called the Great Northern Diver, and the loons over there are called divers. So it's really neat to sort of see the different names that are used. But I want to thank you for an absolutely amazing presentation. It was a nice travelogue of Northern Lights and birds and landscapes and scenery. And that island off of Finland looks like a place where I might end up going at some point.
Yeah, it's really popular, and you get to see, you get off the boat and you actually walk around among the birds, and it's an experience that you pretty much can't beat anywhere else. So
Yeah.
it's called Hornoia.
I think I'll take an umbrella with me though, just to be on the safe side.
Yeah. And I actually had a trip, another trip for work in June, in middle of June. And while I was there in February, our tour guide was saying how spectacular this place is when all the breeding birds are there, like the shorebirds, like plovers and things like that. And he said, if you ever get a chance to come back in the spring or, early summer, then do it. So as it turned out, I ended up having another meeting in the middle of June, and I did the same thing. I actually flew back to Ivalo. I rented a car. I drove up to Batsfjord, and I spent 4 days wandering around the tundra, just by myself, wandering around, hiking all day, all night, because it didn't get dark. It was bright 22 hours, or actually the sun never set. The sun only got about 5 degrees off the horizon before it started coming up again. So I really had to pace myself because it just never got dark. So why stop birding, right? So
well, you have to sleep sometime.
Yes, exactly. So anyway, I went back and just like, if you've never seen the tundra and experienced the wildlife in the tundra, that's definitely something that you should do. It was incredible to see, the birds that we often see, because we're kind of halfway between the equator and the North Pole. So we end up seeing birds from the Arctic migrating through our areas in the spring and the fall, going to their summer or their wintering grounds. So for example, a red knot spends the time in the high Arctic in breeding plumage, and then in August starts making its way south to Chile, where it spends the winter. So by the time we see them, they're out of breeding plumage, they're on a beach somewhere at Martinique or wherever, and they're just gray. And they're not singing.
They all look the same.
They all look the same, yeah. So when you're up there in June, these guys are all wandering around the tundra. There's not a beach to be found. No, there's no water, and they're up on these little humps and they're singing and they're displaying and they're full on color and you know, making, you know, they're doing their little dances and everything else. And it was, you know, every little roadside puddle had red-throated loons breeding in them and long-tailed ducks. It was unbelievable.
Oh, wow.
So it's definitely a summer spot to go to as well.
Okay.
So
In '87, I was in Paisley Bay in the high Arctic. And we had at the end of the bay almost 5 square miles of snow geese. It was just the sound
wow.
was overwhelming.
Mhm.
Amazing coming in by chopper to see just the whole end of the bay is just covered in snow geese.
Yeah, so where I was would have been about the middle of Baffin Island, the equivalent in Canada. And you could drive, like there was a 2-lane highway with full cell service, gas stations, you know, not a lot, but I mean, it's very accessible. Like they call it the accessible Arctic because you can just drive there. And there's, you know,
Well,
I
I was on a ship, so
yeah, exactly. Well, no, that's the thing. You know, I was at 73 degrees latitude,
yeah,
5 bars of LTE cell service, and a gas station.
yeah.
You know what I mean? And I can go into the Rona here in Tantallon and lose signal. Like it's really annoying to know what, you know, the company that innovated Nokia, you know, or the country that, you know, innovated Nokia, what you can do if you just put up enough cell towers. And it's just so aggravating to drive out of the city and lose cell service here because you know it's possible to fix, you know. Anyway.
Okay. Well, thanks. So we have a 15-minute break. So it's 2:35. So 2:35 and 15. You can do the math. I do the math myself, but I'm a busy guy, as the saying goes. So everybody take a 15-minute break. Those of you who are on the Zoom can stay here and chat. You can go up, take a bathroom break, make yourself another cup of tea, if the mood fits you, and we'll reconvene in 15 minutes, and then we'll have Paul with his poem. So take a break, everybody. Do we stop the recording for the break? Yes, so we'll stop the recording and then we'll pick it back up again after the break.
Yeah, so I'm going to drop off. So if anybody needs to reach me or has any questions, feel free to email me or get me on my website. So I appreciate the chance to present today. Thanks, Patrick.
Well, thanks once again for coming. It was an amazing presentation.
Thank you. All right, see you guys.
Take care.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Welcome back. I hope everybody had a good. Oh yes, thank you, computer, for reminding me recording is in progress. So we're back. We're back at the Food for the Soul, where Paul is going to do his poem, and I have a screen to share here, which hopefully will work this time. Share and play. How's that? Can people see it?
Yep.
Okay, take it away, Paul.
Hey, as you know, I always try to do something related either to the meeting or to the season or an event that has occurred. So there's one coming up this month, and that's what the topic is for this. And I see the Judy's computer corrected my printing error or my spelling error, or marked a spelling area. Anyway, balance. From the farthest sunlight's reach, with tiny steps does night creep. With equal measure day has fled. Our spinning sphere in balance does appear. The scales a balance holds upon the sky. Equality as day and night divides. The sun, our spinning sphere, in equal measure shares. Our spinning sphere a balance does appear. This day the sun does mark its center points. This night a fortune teller claims the dark. With seasons lost at setting sun, sun's rising a season soon to come. While in the dark a hero steed flies high, our sister pinwheel trailing floats upon the sky. The fortune teller's tale is heard, the winged stars within the sky descend. Upon the spinning sphere, gathering wings, the fleeing day pursued. Soon, between shooting sky showers, sunlight's harvest is gathered in, as sky hunters their quest to win, do win. And future sunlight's yield is sown, while winged stars the sky ascend. The scales, a balance held upon the sky, just a fleeting turn upon the clock. This night, a fortune teller's tale was told. This day, the sun in equal measure shared. A balance, it does appear, upon our spinning and celestial spheres is here. So as I'm sure most of you can figure out, it's the solstice I'm referring to.
Oh, thank you very much, Paul.
And I like the backgrounds Josie chose. The sun, different positions of the sun.
Yeah, you can see why I was a bit puzzled when she said that there were only 3 suns. I was thinking, no, I remember there being a lot more suns in that picture.
3 bright suns.
Yeah.
Well, 3, yes, 3 bright suns. Okay, I'm gonna. Why does it say my screen sharing is paused? Oh, I'm going to stop it anyway.
Yeah.
And quit out of there. Okay. So next up is David with his look at what's coming up for observing for the next month.
And mute myself from screen. Okay. Everyone sees full screen for this one.
Yep, looking good.
Perfect. Okay. So we're quarter of the way through the month. Hopefully people had a chance to look at this when it was posted at the first of the month, because we missed a few things. Everyone, I guess, can appreciate that the days are getting shorter. It's pretty dark by 9:30, 10 o'clock. Good enough for imaging, and the sun doesn't rise till well after 6:30. By the end of the month, sunset will be just before 7 o'clock, and sunrise will be just after 7 a.m. So good for us imagers, not so good for those that enjoy the sun. And the equinox, autumnal equinox, will be at 3:49 a.m. on September 23rd. Okay. This is what the sun looks like today. A few sunspots. All of them are pretty stable, except for the newest sunspot group. This one, AR 3425. It is a potential source of M-class flares, but that's unlikely to have any dramatic effects. And of course, given the forecast for the next week, we're probably not going to see much of the sun anyway. The moon this month, hopefully you were able to get out on a clear night. It was clear on the 4th and the 5th. The moon was quite striking. It was near Jupiter on the 4th and near the Pleiades on the 5th. So certainly the one on the 5th was a nice photo op. Last quarter of Mate Calling Moon was on the 6th. And on the 11th, the moon will be near the Beehive cluster. So another photo op. New moon on the 15th. Moon's near Antares on the 21st. And the first quarter of the animal fattening moon will be on the 22nd, full moon on the 29th. These were a couple of things to look at. This is what you would have seen through standard 7x50 binoculars on the 5th around 11 o'clock. The moon and the Seven Sisters all in the same field of view. On the 11th, we have the moon and the beehive cluster. You have to get up early for this one, though. It's 4:30 a.m. Want to see that? Beehive cluster will be pretty well washed out by the pre-dawn light if you wait too much later. The moon, best times to check off some targets for the Explore the Moon program will be around September 8th to the 12th, when you'll be able to catch all these targets that are in here in a nice contrast with the shadows. And the planets, Mercury is absent, but will reappear in the pre-dawn sky around the middle of September. And on the 22nd, it will be at its greatest western elongation. So that's a good time to look for the planet that's closest to the sun. If you're up around dawn, you'll notice that Venus is very prominent in the morning sky as it gets farther away from us. Mars, pretty hard to see Mars now. It's very low in the western sky, and by mid-month, this is something to look at. Mars will be occulted by the crescent moon on the 16th of September at 4:40 p.m. So this is a challenge because it's a daylight event. So you're going to have to find a thin crescent moon and then watch Mars disappear behind it. Jupiter rises before midnight now, and as I said, was near the waning crescent gibbous moon rather on the 4th. Saturn rises before sunset in Aquarius, so this is a good time to see Saturn. At the end of the month, on the 28th, it'll be close to the waxing gibbous moon. So as I said, well placed for evening observation and imaging. We saw some images of Saturn earlier today. Uranus rises in the late evening, and it's still at the boundary between Aries and Taurus, and was close to the waning gibbous moon on the 5th. Neptune arises in Pisces during the early evening hours, and on the 19th, it'll be in opposition. So with the exception of, well, actually, by the end of the month, it'll be possible to see all the planets. With the exception of Mars. So this is hopefully if anyone was trying to tick Uranus off on their bucket list with 15 by 70 binoculars, this would have been the view early morning on the 5th of September. This is what you can expect to see on September 16th at 4:40 in the afternoon. So here's the moon relative to the sun. So if you're going to try this, be sure that you don't point your telescope at the sun. And make sure your lens covers are on until you're oriented towards the moon. This is a very, very thin crescent, and this is where Mars will be at 4:40, and it'll then disappear behind the moon. Now is the time to look for zodiacal light in the early morning, so in the eastern sky, just before morning twilight. you look to the east, you'll see the zodiacal light, the pyramid of light, as sunlight reflects off dust concentrated in the plane of the ecliptic. This is what it looked like a couple of years ago. I went out to Shabukto Head, so you don't have to get too far out of the city to look at zodiacal light, but you have to get up early. Explore the universe. We're in autumn, so the autumn constellations: Pegasus, Andromeda, Cassiopeia, Perseus, and Aries. So in the east, you'll find all these fall constellations, part of the Explore the Universe program. Autumn stars, key ones are Mirfak, Hamel, Alpheratz, Algol, Shedar, Markab, and Sheraton. So major stars in those autumn constellations. And autumn deep sky objects, part of Explore the Universe. The one for September is the double cluster. So these are open star clusters, 2 of them in the constellation Perseus. If you're at a fairly dark site, you can pick them out with the unaided eye, and they can be found just between Cassiopeia and constellation Perseus. They're a nice photographic target with a camera. You don't need a super strong lens either to catch them. The double star for September, part of Explore the Universe, is 16 Cygni, Cygni A and B. They're located in the constellation Cygnus. They're yellow dwarf stars, about 69 light years from Earth, and recent findings indicate that there's an exoplanet orbiting the B companion, Cygni B. You're going to need probably binoculars to see these. They're fairly widely separated, but they're just at the limit of unaided eye visibility from a dark site. And that is it for September. Any questions?
Any questions for David?
About the new comet. And he,
I didn't put the comment in there because when I put this together, I'm not even sure if the comet had been discovered at that point. I was away, so I was did this early. But yeah, there is a new comet, and you can see it in the morning. A few people are taking pictures.
Oh, how bright is it?
so somebody said
If
fifth
it's
mag,
really- What is it, Michael, currently? Is it 6?
somebody said 5th magnitude.
Hmm.
They had a 5, but it's supposed to go up to 2nd maybe if we're
Yeah.
lucky.
Yeah, if it doesn't get killed going around the sun.
Yeah.
The sun's already disrupted its tail, dust tail. I saw a picture
I'm
showing.
just I just wonder if Soho would see that comet if it's in a good path.
I don't know. It's
Have to check
it's worth looking for. I got it. I couldn't see it with binoculars earlier in the week, but I did get pictures of it with the Dwarf 2. So but then the skies have been so terrible with the humidity, especially below the horizon.
Yeah, I think that's one of those cases of one comet went in really close to the sun. How many came out?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, David. It's always good to see what's going on in the sky, and for those who want to plan ahead and keep their fingers crossed that the weather will actually be usable. The last thing we have on the official program is notes from the board, which because we've had a long summer break, is actually going to be relatively brief. So let's see. Are we seeing that okay?
Yeah.
Hopefully. Very good. So the first thing on my list is governance. It's usually the first thing on my list, and policy updates. The good news is there aren't any. We haven't had any to do over the summer, but we are going to be doing some updates to the bylaws at some point in the fall, probably in time, hopefully in time for the AGM to be approved, because they may require some changes to bylaw number 1, or our main bylaw.
It will.
The only deadline that I'm aware of coming up is the next deadline for Nova Notes, which is October 20th. So for anybody who's thinking of submitting pictures or submitting an article or anything to Nova Notes, get it in before October the 20th, and you can just send it to Nova Notes Editor. I always tend to find some of those really long usernames. You have to figure exactly where the breaks are between the words, but it's Nova Notes Editor at halifax.rasc.ca. And they will go through, and hopefully they will show up in the next issue. My little spies have also been off on vacation, so there's no center stars for the summer, even though a lot of people have been out doing stuff. So in terms of upcoming events, we've got 4 more members meetings coming up for the remainder of this year. The next one is on October the 14th. And what we're hoping to do for that one is to have a whole bunch of short 5 to 10 minute presentations from various members on what they've done over the summer, if they've gotten a new piece of software, a new piece of hardware, or anything along those lines, some new books. So we'll be putting out a call for people that might want to give some presentations for that. And it doesn't, you don't have to have a PowerPoint presentation to go with it. If it's just a case where you've got a new eyepiece, you want to tell people, what's good about it, what's bad about it. So it doesn't have to be fancy, but it's a great way for people to find out what other members of the center are actually up to. November the 4th, we have Tim Doucette. He's the astronomer guru behind the Deep Sky Eye Observatory down in the down by Yarmouth. What's it, Quinan? Is that Judy? You might remember exactly where the observatory is down there.
Yeah, it's Quinan.
Quinan, yes, of course, like Quinn Smith, Quinan. And he had an opportunity to visit the Canada France Hawaii telescope. So he's going to be telling us a little bit about the trip that he had there. And December 2nd, which is not the second Saturday of the month, we try to keep it a bit earlier to keep it away from Christmas, because people get really busy around Christmas time. The speakers still to be determined, but it will be a relatively short one, well, shortish one, because we also have our annual general meeting, which we've lately been able to do in fairly short order, so that it doesn't fill up the entire meeting. And that's helped by sending all the reports out in advance of the meeting, so people don't have to see them cold when they're actually there. The other upcoming event that we actually have is the observatory's barbecue out at St. Croix. Some of you may know that there have been some issues in West Hants because of the recent flooding. And if you've been out to the St. Croix Observatory before, you may recall you go over a bridge, and there's a big white penstock that brings water from the reservoir up there down to the actual hydro plant down by Highway 1. Well, that whole thing blew apart. It got undercut by the flooding, and once it got undercut, it turned into a royal mess. But they do have the road fixed. They're still doing work on the actual penstock, which should be finished in, I think they were hoping to get it done by within the next month or month and a half. But the road is actually open, although apparently there are a few places in the road where the gravel is fairly large size rock. But the date we picked for it is Friday, September the 15th. So that's this Friday coming up. Oh, interesting. I hardly ever get phone calls. And we have a rain date for that of September the 16th. So if the weather does look like it's bad, we will let people know about it in advance through the announcements list and so on.
Pat, just so people know, looks like we might be getting rained out, but if that's the case, like I said earlier, we, last year's was moved from September to October due to weather. And the next new moon is actually Saturday, October 14, so that weekend of October 13, 14 might be the alternative.
So, okay, so if it looks like the whole weekend is going to be a wash, we'll just bump it back a month.
Yep.
Which also means that there's going to be less flies for those who don't like being eaten by mosquitoes or deer flies or moose flies or all the other types of flies that for some reason seem to think human blood is something they actually need to get their teeth into.
And it gets dark earlier.
And it gets darker earlier too. So that's it for upcoming events. So that's it for news from the board. So does anybody have any last minute questions, comments?
Just a note that the road to Skull was actually, in my opinion, pretty good shape. We were out there on Saturday morning, and it's not bad.
Oh, very good. So they have been they got over that problem with the really rough rock, I take it.
Yeah.
Oh, excellent. It's a good update for that. Oh, I suppose the other thing that's related to the observatory is we now have electricity in the storage room, composting toilet room. Thanks to the hard work of Tony and John and Jerry. Who else was involved with that? It completely slipped my mind until you mentioned the road was being fixed.
There was a paint crew yesterday, Friday. There was Jerry, Bob, Russell, and Tony McGrath. And they worked on and correct me if I'm wrong, Jerry, but it was a primer on the storage room that they got accomplished yesterday. And I think it was Tony, and I don't know who was with him. It might have been John that did the electrification rewiring from the warm room to the storeroom.
Yeah, and we now have electric heat in there. The propane tank and that whole system is now gone.
Yes.
So if you do have to go in and use the washroom or try to find something in the storage area, there's now lights in there, which should make your life a lot easier. You won't have to actually remember to bring a flashlight with you if you're going over there.
Yeah, red and white.
Yes, red and white. Okay.
Neil has his hand raised.
Hi, I just wanted to introduce myself. So just in case people are wondering who this new person is on the Zoom call. So I'm Neil Finkel. I'm a getting back into astronomy after being away for probably 30 years. I used to be a member of RASC Winnipeg. And I sort of just in the last couple of months dusted off my old telescope and then just sort of trying to get geared up again and I've been trying to relearn the night sky and having fun. I thought I would join the RASC Halifax so that I could get in touch with other people that are pursuing this hobby.
Oh, well, thanks for introducing yourself. The one thing about these skies here, we're more or less at the same latitude as Winnipeg, so at least when you relearn them, they're going to be the same ones you had in Winnipeg.
Yeah, the dew has been a challenge. We did not have that in Winnipeg, so I have to get a good.
Yeah, that's right. It is softly dry out there. Yeah, because I used to do planetarium shows, and people, people from the general public would go from Halifax out to Vancouver and be surprised that it's the same constellations that we have here in Nova Scotia. They'll realize you have to go north and south. It's like you just can't go a big distance in any direction you want and expect to see something different. So that's always nice. Well, welcome back into the astronomy fold, and the observatory is available for members to use, and it's not that far from Halifax. It's maybe 45-minute drive from downtown Halifax. Like if you're right downtown by, give or take. I'm about 10 minutes from it where I am in the Windsor area.
That's about right.
Plains, which should be not that far away. I don't think. I'd look forward to going out for sure to get slightly darker skies than what I'm seeing currently.
Yeah, well, it is a really good spot, and it's sort of sheltered from the wind. It has a good southern horizon. Has a toilet facility, and a fairly large parking lot for parking. So
yeah. So if the Neil being new to the center, hopefully you're a member of the Halifax Center's discussion list, because you can go onto there and say, tell the group that you want to go out on a certain night and arriving at a certain time, and other members will know that and go out with you, so that they can show you around, as it were.
Sure, that would be great. Yeah, I don't want to go looking around by myself. That's probably not a good idea.
There is
Sure.
the issue of the gate too. There's a lot to, at least maybe not during the construction, but members have access to a key to get through the gate. So
Yeah.
That's why we sort of try to coordinate it to get everybody out there more or less at the same time.
Yeah.
Oh, somebody said, how do I join the discussion list? Probably the easiest thing to do, since I'm one of the people that manages it, is to just send me an email message. It's patrick.kelly, so Kelly @dal.ca. Because I often remind people it's Dal for Dalhousie, not Dell, the company that makes PC computers. Because I've had the odd person think I'm saying Dell and not Dal. So patrick.kelly @dal.ca. Just send me an email message, something you'd like to be added to the list, and I'll subscribe you to it. That goes for everybody, not just the person who put the question in the chat group.
So is that something we should perhaps post on our website somewhere, that if you are a member, that to contact the vice president, given that's your email?
Well, there is a place on there where you can actually go and just request to be added on. And then
Okay.
I don't get them that often, but every now and then I get somebody who wants to join that's not an actual member. So if I get a request for somebody to be added onto the list, I just check, yeah, if you're a member, I just approve it right away. So there is a way to do it yourself, but you can also just send me an email message and I'll just add you in.
Okay.
Oh yeah, somebody actually typed it in. Excellent. I never even thought to do that. So it's in the chat window for those of you who want to send the request in. Okay, so if that's it, I don't think we have anything else on the agenda for the meeting. So I hope everybody gets out and tries to at least get some observing in before possibly Hurricane Lee shows up, or any other one of those things that tends to cloud the sky over here just when you want it to be clear. And we'll hopefully see you all again in October for our next meeting. So take care, everybody.